Hello and welcome to your in-depth horoscope forecast for September. This is for the Sun or the Ascendant. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I'd be honoured if you did so now. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. That means every time I release a video, you'll get an alert. Now also, if you'd like to ascend above Zodiac sign astrology and embrace natal astrology based on your time, date and place of birth, please check out my special offer of a 12-month forecast and a character analysis and get 30% off. Please see the link beneath this video for more information. Hello Pisces and welcome to your in-depth forecast for September. Your relationship sector is absolutely rocking at the very start of this month, and partly this is of course because the Sun is in the sign of Virgo, which for you is your 7th house or the descendant. This is where we interact with others. It can be where we try to find points of harmony and agreement and collaboration. It can also be where we need to reinforce our boundaries, be a bit more strident and robust about what we will or won't put up with. And you have Mars along with the Sun in your 7th house as this month begins. So if you need to be competitive in terms of your work, or you're a sporty type of Pisces person, then this combination is absolutely splendid. But you also have Mercury and Venus in your 8th house of transitions. Very positive when it comes to deeper, more sensual connections in terms of relationships. But let's just wind right back to the start of the month. So the Sun in the sign of Virgo. Virgo is about virtue, it's about how we see the detail in situations. It can be about discrimination. It can be very much about purity as well. So you're looking for purity around your relationships. In traditional ancient astrology, the 7th house was known as being the sector of open enemies. So these are the people that we work with that, you know, we're not the best of buddies, but we know we have to collaborate with them, and they might get on our nerves a little bit. But we know they're not kind of necessarily going to be plotting against us. They're just people that we need to accept are part of our everyday reality. But then again, the 7th house can be where we want to take on challenges, and that's where its love of sporting interaction can be interesting. But the 7th house is very Libran, so this can also be about our desire to seek approval and to find that greater sense of equilibrium, the balance the 7th house represents. But with Mars there as well, that could prove to be a bit more challenging, but it could give you the push to seek out what you really need in terms of all sorts of relationships. So we're not just talking about personal ties, we're talking about interactions of all kinds. Now the first 10 days, the Sun is in a trine with Uranus, the planet of surprises, which is in a very electric part of your situation, the 3rd house, influencing your nervous system. It's very Gemini. It's also about technology, everyday communications, connections with siblings and neighbours. But Uranus likes freedom and space, can be outspoken, also very much about truth. And the sign of Taurus is very resistant to Uranus because it's in full in this location, because Taurus likes continuity and Uranus likes to challenge that and can be quite a radical sort of influence. But Uranus's angle to the Sun suggests that something could come into your world, particularly on the back of the new moon of the 7th, which also embraces the energy of Uranus in a way that at the very start of the month or the end of August you may not have been contemplating at all. Some drama can unfold, but it can be drama that you actually really enjoy, because you could make a connection with someone who really stimulates you and makes your pulse go a little quicker, or it could be a connection with someone where it's just a shared interest, or where you can give each other mutual encouragement, and maybe you have very different ways of looking at things, but there's some kind of mutuality between you that you can both celebrate. But some kind of connection can really be very uplifting for the first 10 days of this month. Now, the two ruling planets of Scorpio, traditional Mars, modern Pluto, higher octave, they are forging a really amazing angle also in the first 10 days. Now Pluto, the planet of change and transformation, but also of power, is in your 11th house of friendship, and its link to Mars in your 7th house creates an alliance which is very motivated. It gives or will give you an enormous amount of willpower. So if there is somebody that you're drawn to, or a group of people, so a friendship circle, a network that comes through the energy of Pluto, Mars really can give you much more desire, because Mars is about instant gratification, to seize the moment. So even if you're someone who can be a little timid, or perhaps, just stay in your immediate world because you do have that need for peace and tranquility at times, I think you're being asked to be a bit more daring, but particularly around relationships this month. It doesn't have to be only of a romantic kind. All sorts of relationships, whether that requires you to be a bit more out there, not hiding your talents under the bushel, whether it's about being more competitive, whether it's about saying what you want in an existing relationship in a more assertive way, Mars. Uranus is about your truth, how you think, your everyday ideas, time to refresh things if need be, go for it. So a lot of very stimulating stuff at the first 10 days of this month. So fantastic, and a real chance for you to bring a real sense of vibrancy to your world. Now, I mentioned before that Venus is in your 8th house, which is quite sensual, but that's in a very positive alliance with Saturn in your 12th house. Something behind the scenes you've been working on, perhaps it's a long-term saving plan or legacy or pension, could mature in a very positive way from about day 3 to day 7, and you can be very pleased with progress. What's less helpful is that Venus is clashing with Pluto across broadly the same group of days, last couple of days longer through to the 9th. So there could be someone you really fancy in your friendship circle, and they may really fancy you, and it could be that it's really cooking on gas when it comes to that charismatic electric magnetism. But whether you're truly compatible or not is another matter. So lust is a definite possibility across those days, but also lust for money too. So a friend, for example, could suggest a get-rich-quick scheme, and because of the energy and force field that Mars and Pluto particularly create, your desire to be very thrusting in your approach could tempt you into this. Now, I'm not saying not to do anything. I'm just saying make sure that you check out details in a very vigorous way, because with Mercury in your 8th house, you can dive deep. Mercury in the 8th house is very much the murder detective. It's the person who's looking at all the different evidence to evaluate what really happened with the crime. And at times we all have to don our detective's mac and be a little bit more scrutinising in our approach. And remember, with the Sun and Virgo in Sun and Mars in the sign of Virgo, that is very much about details. And because your sign is so very sensitive and often very compassionate, very sacrificing, I think having the Sun and Mars in the 7th house together at the start of the month can be very reinforcing for some of your more tender elements of your nature. So if there is something that you need to ask some searching questions on, ask them. It may still be a good opportunity for you. Just get it out in the open. Now the 10th sees Venus climb into the sign of Scorpio, which of course is your water triplicity. So for you, this is good stuff. Venus in Scorpio is very, very sensuous, but this is your 9th house. So what you're looking for in an ongoing relationship is the truth. And if you're looking to meet somebody new, don't be surprised if it's someone from a completely different culture, particularly across week 3, because Venus goes face to face with Uranus. A really electric energy, that one. But it also could see you wanting to break free of a tie that isn't working for you. So we can't just assume that you're looking for something. You may be looking to understand how you deal with your current situation. And certainly Venus is a no-nonsense transit through the sign of Scorpio, particularly in week 3 when it goes opposite Uranus. Because Uranus in your 3rd house, as I said before, is seeking the truth in terms of your values. And it may mean at times that some very frank discussions need to take place. Now on the 15th, Mars climbs into the sign of Libra. In technical astrology, Mars is in detriment in the sign of Libra, but for you, this is exciting stuff, you know, the 8th house. Mars is about instant gratification. The 8th house is about loot, but it's about lust. And if these are things you really, really want, you're going to be very motivated to find them in the following 6 weeks. But on the 19th, Mercury's going into shadow. Shadow is when Mercury slows down in preparedness for its retrograde, which begins on the 27th this month. Remember, each of the 3 retrogrades this year are in air signs, unlike last year when they started in water signs 3 times and had 2 transits into air signs briefly. But that created a real splodgeathon, as I called it last year, a lot of confusion. So Mercury being in shadow in the 8th house is asking you to be very particular about details and the psychology of situation. But if you're really interested in astrology or the tarot or any paranormal strand, you can really feel excited and charged by that interest in the last phase of this month. The 20th, however, does see a full moon in your sign. And remember I said to you, if you're not happy in a current relationship, then maybe you need to look at that. And this particular full moon really brings that concept to the fore in the following 2 weeks. So if there are, pardon me, some things that need to be discussed, teased out into the open, then Mars gives you great willpower to do that. Undoubtedly, but on the 22nd, as we have the autumn equinox and the sun glides into the sign of Libra too. Libra is about balance, equanimity, but it's an air sign, so it's about logic. So a lot of logic will need to be applied to where you're most invested in the last 10 days of this month. Now that invested could be in terms of your stocks and shares and money, it could be in terms of the people you work with, it could be in terms of who you bank with, or it could be in a romantic context. Just depends on your personal situation. But this begins the 3rd quadrant of the year, the 3rd cardinal quadrant at 0 degrees Libra, which is an earth point, a very critical point. So for you, there's transformations that the 8th house are about, which can be some endings, are really important for you. So if you're grappling with a property matter or those longer term financial issues, or you are thinking about in a spiritual context moving on in some way, this is a big phase of the year. Particularly I feel with Mercury going into retrograde on the 27th, because although we always think of Mercury retrograde in terms of the glitches that it undoubtedly can cause, also there's the side of Mercury retrograde which gives us opportunities. You know, it's rewind, so revisit, reprise, reassess. You know, there are ways to look at Mercury retrograde in a more enlightening manner. But Mercury is clashing with Pluto towards the end of this month. And if your personal values at a deep, deep level are just not meshing with someone in a group, even if there's someone new that's come in that's really dramatic, perhaps it's an old relationship that you're going to be analysing, or an old business project that you've spent a lot of time investing your energies in, and maybe it's got to the point where you're thinking, do I reapply my talents, my energy and my money in something that gives me a much greater connection and meaningfulness, because that's what 8th house energy is about. So with Mars and Pluto in a trine this month, with the Sun going in week 3 into a trine with Pluto, with the Sun being in a trine with Uranus in the first 10 days and meshing into that new moon, with the full moon in your sign on the 20th, this is a really exciting month, and it's a month which gives you a lot of celestial tools in order to reimagine how you'd like your life to be. So astrology is essentially the measurement of time, and with the information that the planetary movements gives us, then making sure that we carry out movements that are well timed. So I think for you, this is a time to be more dramatic, more determined to get what you need around relationships, and then you're going to deal with the reality of some of your changes in the latter part of the month. But I feel that you can do that because the great thing about you being a mutable sign, and because your co-ruler is Jupiter, which is essentially very optimistic, is you can always evolve. You're never stuck as being one thing. You're never one-dimensional. You're always flowing in lots of different ways. Thank you so much for joining me.